and I will start admitting the first few people. Welcome to the November Spotlight Guest Host monthly live event. We have these on the first Wednesday of every month, and we'll just give everybody a few minutes to get in here. I'm excited about this one, Pattie, and I don't even know exactly what you're going to be talking about, but when you say the mind is the body is the mind, I could not agree more. I'm absolutely, yes. But we'll get into all of that. And if you are joining us, feel free to go ahead and come on in. Let PB and I see your lovely faces. Yes, there we go. Hi, David. And I'll put show non-video participants, so maybe it doesn't look like it's empty in here. Hi, Jen.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't find my webcam. I've only just done
some work,
and I just thought, I'm not going to miss this.
That's okay. We'll look at your beautiful little guinea fowl. I think that's what those are. How do I know that word? I don't even know. I have no idea how I know that, but I think there it is.
You knew they were guinea fowl, because lots of people say chickens.
Yeah, I don't know. It just popped into my head. I've never met one in person, so maybe they told me just now, you know?
Yeah, sure, guys.
Collective conscious. So come one, come all. I see there's a few people watching in Facebook. I did put the link just above where we are streaming. So go ahead and just come all the way in, and you can participate, you can ask questions, and it'll just be a little bit more lively if you're actually here. So come on in. So like I said, we have these on the first Wednesday of every month, and we have a different guest host each time. Today's guest host is Pattie Belle Hastings, and I am your always regular, usual, standard old host, Krista Bowman. We're going to be streaming live in the Hypnotherapy Uncensored Facebook group, and this will also be going up on our YouTube channel within a day or two. It usually takes me a day or two to sort of, edit and crop and get it nice and beautiful, and then I'll put it up. And you'll find the link to that in the Hypnotherapy Uncensored group. Now, if you're not a member of the Hypnotherapy Uncensored group and you found your way in here some other way, reach out to me or even Pattie Belle directly, and we can get you in. And that way you can also check out all the other interviews that are coming up, as well as all the ones that we have already done. And you'll never miss another one. I encourage you guys to pop any questions that you may have for Pattie Belle, who also goes by PB, into the chat, which is just to the right of the Zoom screen. And if you have questions that can't wait, just raise your hand too, and then I can see that you need to be addressed right away. And let's see, we have an absolutely fascinating subject today, somatic inductions. The body is the mind, and the mind is the body. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pattie Belle, and then I'm going to hand it completely over to her. So she's a certified hypnosis practitioner, loves to share her methods and practices that have brought her success, prosperity, and spiritual growth. She's trained in many hypnotic methods: NLP, embodied leadership, somatic money coaching, life-centered therapy, shamanic journeying, and more. And she has created an individualized hypnotic solution for clients. This is sort of her ongoing thing, who are ready and willing to change. And she specializes in the spiritual journeys, much like me, past life regression, between lives, digital detox, divine finances. So yes, with all of that, now let's have Pattie take it away, and I will keep letting people in, and I'll keep an eye on the chat box so you don't have to, okay? All right, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Let me see. Let me check my view here. Yeah. I'd love to start by inviting you to kind of take a moment to drop into your body right now. So this is totally optional, of course, but just to, maybe close your eyes and start to connect to your breath. Just coming into the present and letting all the other millions of things going on kind of drop away. And then just, starting to notice your body and how it's positioned, maybe make a little adjustment. And just like settle into the present moment. Just kind of ground into the here and now. And that is a little taste of somatics. It's something that many of us do all the time, right? As part of our, spiritual practices or part of our hypnotic practices, all of those sorts of things. It's, just coming back into the body. So I've got a couple of slides that I've prepared for you. I'm going to be showing a bunch of resources. I have specifically picked resources that are not common in the hypnosis community so that they're new to you. I'll be mentioning resources that you are extremely familiar with, right? But I really focus today on ones that you probably haven't run into. Maybe some of you have. So that it's, new information and you can make the connections to all of the pieces of this puzzle that you've already met or that you've already collected. So let me share my screen. I have a handout that I'm going to be giving everybody. That has links to all of the people and the books and the things that you're going to see over the next few minutes. So you don't have to worry about scrambling and writing down authors and names and things like that. I have a handout that we'll make available in the Facebook group and in the chat here so that you can easily look at these resources yourself. So to give a little bit more background of how I came into the somatic world is through my practices of executive coaching. So long before I was a hypnotist, a couple of decades ago, I really got into executive corporate training and coaching, a lot around the creativity world, and then into embodied leadership. So it was through embodiment practices and embodied leader trainings and things like that that I really got into the somatic world and the body of the leader at that time, right? Fast forward 20 years because we don't need to know all of the travails. Fast forward, and it was just a perfect dovetail to integrate with my professional hypnosis practice. I've been trained in all of the regular, typical inductions, that we all learn in our certifications. And I've been certified in lots of different forms of hypnosis. And now, slowly but surely, I am working through Chris's QJH. So eventually I will be certified in that as well. So some of the resources and trainings that, I've picked up along the way are, about the different levels and layers of our body. So we've got proprioception, right? Which is really our body moving in space and, taking up space and taking shape and taking form, taking action. And then interoception. And this is the piece that I'm really going to be focusing on because it is a portal into health and healing and change. And that is the sensations within the body. So one of the handout sheets is just a gigantic list of sensations so that we can start to sense, what's going on inside of the body. And I'll explain how that unfolds in a hypnosis session later. And then last, is exteroception. And that's basically the information that is coming in from outside of our body through the senses, right? So proprio, intero, and extero. And I'm going to be honest, until I was like 30 or in my early 30s, I just pretty much viewed my body as this thing to carry my brain around, right? That my brain was the important thing, the thinking, all of this stuff, right? And that the body was just, meant as a vehicle. Fortunately, I learned that my body is my brain and my brain is my body, and that they're interconnected. Science is now coming to us, telling us that our gut is deeply connected to our brain, that our gut health is as critical to our brain health as, any other, part of our experience. So once I started to understand the importance of embodiment and taking on embodiment practices for myself and really having amazing outcomes and experience from that, I really became a student of embodiment and somatics. And oops, sorry about that. I have studied and worked with a number of different somatic and embodiment teachers over the years. One of my main teachers, Ken Nelson from Kripalu, which is a yoga center up in New England in the Berkshires. He and his team have written this book, Life-Changing Workshops, but I was taking this transformational workshop, designing transformational workshops with them, and they were taking us through a process where you drop into the body and communicate with the body. And it was so powerful. It was so life-altering. I was like, I have to incorporate this in my coaching. At the time, I was still just an executive coach. I was not doing hypnosis. And I started trying it out with my clients. And one of the things that if, you start to work with these sorts of things with clients, one of the things that you'll notice is that there's some people that are very, very tuned into their bodies, and some people who are completely cut off, but are trying to reestablish that connection. And, one of the sort of, let's call it diagnostics, that I use when working with a client and determining how connected they are to their interoception, to the sensations that they have in their body, is, when I am, inducing them into, using the somatic induction, I have them isolate their left pinky toe. And that is a really good sign to me when they can lock that in as to how, what their sensitivity level is at this point, right? And it grows and it changes, and it's something that you're constantly working on. I mean, I'm constantly trying to become more articulate about the sensations in my body and more understanding of what those sensations are trying to communicate to me. Because I really believe it is truly wisdom. So after this workshop, I think they called it the clearing or something. Anyway, Ken became my, I called him my soul coach, but basically he became, one of my trainers or coaches. And then I found Eugene Gendlin's Focusing. And I highly recommend the audiobook for this. Because he walks you through the process. He explains the process, and then he kind of walks you through it so that you can really get an idea of exactly how this unfolds. This is not hypnosis, this book, Focusing. It is a psychotherapist that takes people into the body. It is hypnotic. I would argue that these people are in trance, but they don't call it hypnosis. Right? They don't call it hypnosis. Through my embodied leadership training, with a bunch of groups and people out of Boston, I was introduced to the work of Richard Strozzi Heckler, very famous for the embodied leadership somatic coaching piece, and have gotten a lot of great information and learnings from his work as well. And he has a ton of books out. I think I have a couple of them up here. And then for those of you that are really interested in taking this on, I highly recommend this book here, the Somatic Psychotherapy Toolbox. And I'm going to show you. It is chock full of different somatic exercises that you can use for yourself or for your clients. And then here's another Strozzi Institute, the Art of Somatic Coaching, and I have links to all of the different things in the PDF that you'll get. Then in 2017, I separated from my husband for 25 years, and he had been managing the money or whatever. And I found Barry Tesler, who is a financial therapist whose background and training is in somatic therapy. So financial somatic therapy. So I started studying with Barry. I now work for Barry and have for several years as one of her mentor coaches. But this piece, once we start to connect into the emotions, the sensations, the feelings, and then we start working with the money work, you can have gut-wrenching experiences, you can have, fabulous, pleasurable experiences around money, but that somatic piece really, really accelerates people's healing around money issues. And that's one of my specialties in my hypnosis practice. Actually, before all of this, as I was just starting to get into somatic coaching, embodied coaching, embodied leadership, I was the leader of a visual and performing arts department for many years. And one of the programs within that was theater. So I was very involved with the directors and the actors and the writers, etc., and was introduced to physical theater, and in this case, action theater, the improvisation of presence. You will also find these more performative branches of somatics referred to as authentic movement. And an offshoot of authentic movement is also ecstatic dance, right? So these somatic practices, can really reverberate out into lots of different creative things, creative ways. But the final one I want to land on is my most recent teacher, and I've completed the level 1 training in life-centered therapy. This book, The 1 Hour Miracle, terrible name for a book, but the marketing department, I think, probably required them to call it that. I found this book on a podcast. I heard a hypnosis podcast talking to, interviewing Andy Hahn, and then recording a session that she did with Andy Hahn. Now, Andy does not call this hypnosis, but it is unbelievably hypnotic, and it does involve trance and connecting to the body, right? So I highly recommend this, and have been weaving these teachings into my practice, my hypnosis practice as well. So let me describe, I think this is this is my last page of this. Yeah. Let me describe a couple of the different ways that I take people into their hypnotic experience through their body. I had a recent client. A lot of my clients have trauma. I'm probably sure a lot of your clients probably do as well. I don't actually do weight loss or smoking or some of the more lucrative and common hypnosis clients. Most of mine come to me the desire for past life, spiritual journeys. They hear me on podcasts for those things. So a couple of weeks ago, I had a client, and I determined through the intake form and my initial interview, that 20-minute free, sometimes a little stretched to 30, my free strategy call, I'll start to determine how best to serve that client. And for someone that I think is really connected to their body and would benefit from going into the experience through the body, I will start the induction that way. So I have like some little rituals and invocations that I perform at the beginning, have them connect to the breath, and then have them go into interoception. So I guide them to scan their body, seeking and sensing any sensation. It could be pleasurable, it could be uncomfortable, it could be painful, but whatever sensation calls out to them, right? And then I have them focus all of their attention on that sensation. If they do not have aphantasia, I do have clients that have aphantasia, which means that they can't get visuals. If they don't have aphantasia, I start to just ask them questions about the sensation. Does it have a mass, a shape, a weight, a color, a pattern, a texture, a temperature? I will, just let them slowly describe what that sensation is. And then, similar to parts, I will start to have them connect with that sensation in a dialogue. Depending on how the session goes, then they might use that place, that sensation, as the portal to the scene or experience that they need for the outcome they're trying to achieve in our session. So a recent one, we were doing the body scan, and at the beginning, I'm just getting her to drop down in the interoception. She had a lot of spiritual practice and experience, was a trained hypnotist. So I knew that this was going to be, fairly easy to get her to drop in. And she immediately said, "My feet are freezing. My feet are freezing." And I was like, okay, feet are freezing. Go into it. What's happening? And she sees that, she's standing in snow. It's icy. It's heavy snow. It is a blizzard. She's standing in a blizzard. And then as the scene unfolds, the story that comes through was their village had been raided and burned to the ground. And she was the only surviving male adult from the village. And all of this information came out about why that was that she survived and all of those sorts of things. But she's trying to lead the surviving women and children out of that area to seek shelter because everything is burned to the ground. So this whole story unfolds, and it all started from that sensation in the feet. So And this is, this is a common induction for me. So I could tell like a dozen different or more different stories along those lines. I never know where they're going to go. And I never know what part of the body or what sensation is going to be the thing that pulls them in. It's like they could come in and they could say, oh, I've got these migraines or whatever. And then it ends up being their elbow that is the access point to where it is we need to go. So I can't even predict. I can just hold the space for how that unfolds. And then I have to come back to Andy Hahn's life-centered therapy for a second, because after I heard that podcast, so when he was doing the podcast session with, I have to look up the podcast, but it's one of the hypnosis podcasts. The session with her, she goes into an experience where she lost children, and it was tied directly to anxiety that she was having, and anxiety and behaviors that she was having with her children in this life. And, I listened to that podcast and I'm like, shit, this is freaking awesome. I got to get this book. Well, the print hadn't published yet, but the audio was available. I had recently, before I heard this book or heard this podcast, I had saved a family member's life during a traumatic seizure event, and I'd hurt my body really bad. It's a 150-pound dead weight of a person that I'm trying to save their life. I'd hurt my left knee so bad that I could not walk the dog for weeks. It was not getting better. It was just not getting better. And I was doing all the trauma therapy, all the stuff, right? And I was like, well, what have I got to lose? I'm going to get this book. I'm going to listen to it. And I did as instructed in the audiobook. I dropped in. I went to the knee. I started communicating with it. I used it as a portal, and it took me right to a life where, I was in a skirmish, and had gotten an arrow in the knee and it was totally shattered, and I was dying in the woods. And that narrative, I could go into the whole story or whatever, but that narrative unfolded over, the next few meditations. And within 48 hours, my knee was healed. I was walking the dog and operating as usual. It was, I was shocked, frankly shocked. And that's when I went and immediately signed up for the level 1 training in the methods, because it was so dramatic and so immediate. I was like, this is really interesting. This is something. So I've woven those into my process. And every client is individual, and there are contraindications. So I have some clients that have had bodily trauma so intense that, here I can stop. I will stop sharing so you can just see me. I've had clients that have had bodily traumas throughout their life that were so intense that it's not a safe place for them. Their body is not actually safe for them. So I will deter and use other methods to get them induced into trance for the work that they need to do. So I have a couple of clients that, I just wouldn't even go there with that. And for some clients, it's the beginning process of them reconnecting to their bodies and growing that experience of interoception and proprioception and exteroception, and starting to really inhabit, their bodies in a new way. I'm just looking to see if there were any questions in the chat. So depending on the client, the process, I will incorporate, somatic practices, throughout the session. So it may be that I have them take a position, right, with their body that's related to what it is that they're experiencing in order to shift the energy or to embody that. So it's kind of like an expansion on anchors, which most of us know. I mean, this being probably the most famous, right? The okay sign. Take a deep breath in, make the okay sign, release, and relax. So that every time that I make the okay sign after that, it reminds me, or it brings in that sense of relaxation. It's like a trigger. Okay, relax, right? I think I planted that anchor listening to a Will Horton podcast from 20 years ago, or when podcasts first happened. But expanding on that, if a client is sitting, it could be that, we incorporate, movements, receiving, gesturing, we bring the body into the process. And it varies wildly, depending on who's working on what, right? But those can have those, bringing those body somatics positions. If they're standing, if you think about the NLP circle of excellence, right? Or whatever, the person who's delivering it calls it, right? That idea that there's, this beam of light and there's all this power, and then you step into it, right? That is a somatic practice. But some others are to, take a stance, right? And this could look like, oh, this is nothing. I put a client into this position once before they were ready for it, and their whole body started shaking. Like the power, the invitation, the receiving was too much too soon. So even though it looks like, that's just like taking a position or whatever, it can be energetically powerful. And if they're not ready for it, it can be overwhelming. So, some of those things, I understand better now how to test for somebody's ability to take in light, energy, receiving, whatever somatic thing that we're trying to move them, that next life, that new change that we're trying to move them into. So I think I'd love to open this up for questions. If anybody has questions.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to say that shaking thing. I don't talk about this much, but I had an accidental Kundalini awakening some time ago. At the time I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know what it was. I was like, oh, that's a yoga practice. That's not going to just descend upon my body out of nowhere. Boy, was I wrong. And then since then, I've actually had what two of my Lorraine friends call a Shakti awakening. And I was like, well, that's a new one. So I looked it up and I was like, yep, that's exactly, but it's that shaking. And in my case, it's through receiving light through my hands. So yes, being careful about that with your clients. That's just I'm so glad you touched upon that.
Yeah, the
Because not everybody's
energetic,
ready to receive that much.
yeah, the
it's a
energy
lot.
can be so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else have questions? Pop them into the chat or just raise your hand. Can you see everybody from your screen, Phoebe?
I can see everybody
really
from
see
my
everybody.
screen, and
Okay.
I can, I'm going to remove my spotlight. So if people want to look at it in the grid gallery, they can look at it in the grid gallery.
And I actually use a lot of, I guess, more somatic induction myself, because while I'm getting better at it, I used to really struggle with visualizing. I was great at it as a little kid. Then I had a near-death experience at 18, and I think that shut it off. There was so much that happened, and not all of it was like, it was traumatizing and incredibly beautiful simultaneously, but it was too much.
Yeah.
And I shut off my ability to visualize, and it's coming back now, but with a lot of practice. And I can't always rely on it. So what I can rely on is the kinesthetic, because that I'm very auditory and kinesthetic, probably to compensate for the fact that I shut off my ability to visualize a long time ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really appreciate that. And that was one thing in the very first hypnosis training I had, was they only had one induction and it was very visually based. And I would get so frustrated thinking that, like, what's wrong with me that I can't do this? You know, and they would say, like, and you can look down and see your feet. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I cannot. I definitely cannot see my feet. I can't see anything. I see the backs of my eyelids. Like, that's all I can see, you know? Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I've had to train myself, you know, in sessions to say, see, sense, hear, know, feel, smell,
Yeah.
taste, because I think that it's a lot more common than we thought, that people don't have this visual life on the inside. I've been reading more and more articles about it. It's fascinating.
It is. And I think part of it is, there's definitely a neurological aphantasia, but I think there's also a limiting belief part, where a person is expecting that when they visualize, it will be like a movie screen right in front of them, whereas it's not always like that.
Yeah.
But then they can dream. When they're dreaming, they visualize just fine, right? So the limiting belief thing, I think, can get in the way. As soon as you say to yourself, I can't visualize, that sort of shuts down. Your brain goes like, oh, okay, well, we're not doing that anymore. Not even going to try because you said you can't. So yeah, there's that. But you know, in QJH, because you've mentioned it a few times, we do ask to dial all of the senses wide open, like all of them, you know, see, sense, everything, touch. And then one thing that I like to just say is, tell me what you're experiencing and how you're experiencing it, rather than trying to like lead them and say, like, what are you seeing? And then they can't, or, you know, maybe they can't imagine what they would hear. So if I say, what are you hearing? And they like your voice, right? So I just say, what are you experiencing and how are you experiencing it? And then you know, and you don't have to like keep, you know, pussyfooting around like, well, which sense do you use the most? So anyway,
right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that I bring people back to again and again is the emotions, the feelings, right? So they'll be in a scene and I'll say, what are you feeling? And then they'll report out whatever that is. And then I'll say, where are you feeling that in your body? So even though they're in another life, like I had one in India that was in India at a funeral for his son, a woman in this life, male in India. And, you know, I bring it back to the body and I'm like, what are you feeling? She's like, stress. I'm just overwhelmed with stress. You know, which we might have thought it would be grief or, you know, some other, preconception that we have. So I'm always like bringing it back to the feelings and the sensations, whether it's this life or, some other scene that they're experiencing.
And isn't that a beautiful validation of multidimensional consciousness? That we can be in our body in this life in your office, and also be experiencing a then and a there, and have it still be able to relate back to us here now.
You can be at a funeral in 1800s India.
And yet also in your bed experiencing that wound that caused the death that led to the funeral in your body here now.
Yeah.
Multidimensional consciousness.
I have a client who has pretty severe aphantasia. We suspicion that it was from lots of ECT. And he was able to sense and know multiple lifetimes without any inner sight whatsoever. There was one, he knew he was in a mud prison, and he could feel the mud, he could sense the mud, the dread, he knew he was innocent, it was like, and then another life in another session, he was on a ship that wrecked, and he knew he was on a ship, and he could feel and sense and know everything about that without seeing anything. Yeah,
and I think that knowing part is really important. I actually don't just teach VAK, I teach VACK, the C standing for cognitive, because we often can just know without seeing, hearing, feeling, touching. It's just a knowing, and it's unquestioning. It's just like, I know exactly what's happening, or where I'm at, or how I died, and when you say, how do you know, they can't always explain it, they just know.
Yeah.
That's a really important component.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really loved about the life-centered training, and that it really wasn't in the hypnosis world or all of the baggage that comes from being in the hypnosis world, was really this idea that it doesn't matter whether you believe in other lives or lives on other planets, or whatever the story that's coming through is, it's a healing narrative. It's the healing narrative. And it's the story, the metaphor, the real, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what you believe, it's the story that's coming through.
Exactly. And actually I say that in the pre-talk. I say something along those lines, but rather than having that, analytical part of you going, is this real? Is this valid? How do we know? Am I just making this up? Is this just all in my imagination? To which I say yes, because everything is at the level of imagination. Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Like capital E, everything. Anyway.
Yeah.
But what I'll say to them is, just imagine that your consciousness is telling your story. It's like a little fairy tale. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Allow it to unfold, because maybe it's possible that it really is just our subconscious mind's way of coming up with a symbolic, metaphorical story to help us heal, in which case the healing narrative. And it doesn't matter where it comes from, whether it's valid, whether it's real in some qualitative way, right?
Exactly.
So yes, I love that.
My knee healed. I'm like, it's like, does it matter whether the story is true or not? No, I can.
And if you believe that you can talk to the cells of your knee and that they in fact respond, and then you're like walking again with no problem, then we don't yet have the scientific tools to, again, qualify and validate why that works, but you're proof that it does. You have empirical evidence, right?
Yeah.
And the same for me. I've healed myself of a lifelong bleeding disorder that has nearly taken my life a couple of times. I wasn't diagnosed with it till I was 17, but I'd had it before that. We just didn't know why I kept bruising so easily and why I wasn't clotting very well and stuff. But at the age of 44, I knew I had an upcoming surgery, and I didn't want to have to take there's the stuff that they give you when you have, bleeding disorders to make it clot. But I was getting close to that age where like, well, now that's a whole other issue. Like now we have to watch out for embolism and stroke and, you know, all that, thrombosis. And so I decided I was going to heal it. And I used hypnosis and I totally healed it. I healed it straight up. It's gone. I still sometimes will get little indications of it. And I can always tell because I'll start to bruise a little bit easier again. And I'm like, but then I'll just eat some more kale. And so, you know, do the stuff for the vitamin K, and then it's good again. And I'll do a little bit more hypnosis and it's good again. So absolutely, we can talk to the consciousness of our blood cells. You can talk to the consciousness of your knee. I've talked to the consciousness of cancerous tumors. And they're very confused, usually, cancer. You know, they have this will to live, but they know they're killing their host.
Yeah, I've witnessed and facilitated profound conversations between clients and their body, right? And different parts of their body. Oh, another somatic research.
Oh, and our thyroids, our throats often have a whole lot to say, don't they? Have you run into that?
Yes, I have. Recently, I had a client who had throat cancer, and yeah, and we've been working with that. This is somatic internal family systems.
Yeah, I'm going to type that.
If you're familiar with internal family systems, IFS, it's like parts, only family members.
I mean, I do that kind of too in the version that we use. Who is this guy?
But this one is the somatic approach. But you'll see it: awareness, breath, resonance, movement, and touch in practice.
Who's the author?
This is Susan McConnell.
Okay. Okay, got it.
And then
I'm just
you know, the body is not an apology.
I like that title.
Which really goes into race, disability, you know, all of the different factors of our body and how we show up in culture, society, etc. This is unbelievable. And she also has a workbook that goes with it.
That is a beautiful title.
She is absolutely amazing. I love this book. And I'm going to try and do a book group on this with at my university next year.
I love that. That'll be exciting. Lucky students.
So I mean, I have so many somatic resources. I was like, you know, I could bombard you with like long bibliographies, but I was like, no, I'm just going to pick out the ones that I think that they can grab the most from the fastest, that they probably haven't seen or come across in your travels.
And stories. We love stories. So, you know, science stories. Like when I was talking to the consciousness of my blood cells, it actually led to a past life memory where I was a hemophiliac. And that got stuck in my consciousness and carried forth to this, where I'm not a hemophiliac, female, but I have factor 7 instead of factor 8. That one, I died as a child with a factor 8, which is the hemophiliac one. And so I wouldn't have known that. And at the time that it happened, I was not convinced that past lives were even really a thing. But I decided it doesn't matter what I believe. If my body's bringing this to me and it's healing it in this way, then, you know, and since then I don't even know what I believe ever anymore at all. I've decided it doesn't matter. I'm just open to whatever, you know. It's not
that's
about
basically
my
that's
opinions
basically
and my beliefs.
That's basically where I came to, you know, especially with, you know, some of my early clients, you know, having lives on other planets. I was like, what? Wait, where are we?
Yeah.
I'm like,
and
okay.
Again, maybe it's just a symbolic, you know, metaphor, narrative.
Yeah.
You know,
I've had people go back to being lizards like in prehistoric Earth.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's like, so I don't know what story needs to come through, but the clients came out of these things with a total new understanding of themselves. and why they needed to see that and why they needed to experience it.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that that you found a way to help take people there that doesn't rely so heavily on the visualization method, which I think is way overused in traditional hypnosis, And I don't know if we've just lost that ability as part of human evolution, or maybe as a response to all the screens that we're watching. Maybe people were more visual at some point, and that's why that became such a foundation in traditional hypnosis. But it does seem like there are, I don't know, I would say probably 20 to 30% of the clients I have are not particularly visual.
Well, I'm going to suggest something controversial, and that is that.
I love that. Come on, bring it.
That is that some of the fathers of hypnosis were never questioned. Everybody just
some
took
of the
it.
Current fathers are also never questioned. So
well, yes. So, some of the things that I read historically about, the founding fathers, I'm horrified. I'm absolutely horrified at some of the things that were done. And these people were never questioned. One, because they were doctors and nobody questioned doctors, right? So do I think that it has changed whether we can visualize or not? No, I just don't think that we were conscious or open to the variety of perceptions and experiences that people have. Yeah. I think, and a lot of it's still getting perpetuated. I mean, if I've learned anything in all these years of study in hypnosis, is that it is creative and it is receptive to whatever creativity you bring to it. And that, these rules, eye catalepsy or, fractionation, sure, yes, absolutely they work. Are they right for everything? Or every client or every method? No.
You know what I do with kids sometimes? And I've even had to do it with a couple of adults, actually, where I have somebody who's like, you can't hypnotize me. I don't think you can. I'm not hypnotizable, that whole thing. And for the most part, I don't get people like that anymore, but unless it's a kid. But I'll do that whole, assuming trance causes trance thing. Like, okay, you might be right, but let's see if you can fake it so good that I can't tell the difference. And guess what?
I love that. That's good.
Damn, they go into a trance. And at the end of it, they're like, wow, I really did, didn't I? I think I really did. And I was like, sure seems that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't matter. So I used to take it personally if somebody didn't go into a super deep trance. But as soon as I took my ego out of the equation, and that's really it. As soon as I took my own ego out of the equation, I'm not the one inducing the trance. It's not all up to me to heal them, right? As soon as I took my ego and was like, you can stay on the shelf, I'll pick you back up later, maybe. And I just did the very best that I could do with everything that I had, knowing that they were doing the very best that they could do with everything that they had. And what we discovered was that if they didn't go into a super deep trance, it was by design. They weren't ready yet. They weren't ready. And what they needed was to have more trust. And so we would have this very mildly hypnotic situation where it was almost just like storytelling and just, gentle. But I didn't try to knock them out, dance them to the floor, all the stuff. I would just, wherever they meet me is where I would be at, because it's all about building that rapport and having that energetic connection. And then, and that in and of itself is so healing. I think people discount that. When a person's been walking around with a dysregulated central nervous system for so long, to just sit in somebody's office for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just feel at peace and feel validated and feel trusted and not judged and cared for, right there, so healing. And then the second session, they would trance through the floor all on their own, So I don't think that you necessarily need to always like assume that every single person needs the same approach, and that if they're not in a super deep state of trance, that means that you yourself and your ego somehow has failed. Get your ego out of there. Get it out, right?
You know,
Sorry,
this is
that's
one of
just
the
my little
reasons.
soapbox.
This is one of the reasons that I do not agree to single sessions. Because one, we hear of like, oh, they went to one session for non-smoking and never smoked again or whatever. The people I'm dealing with are looking for, a spiritual catharsis or a personal growth, life catharsis, trauma healing, things like that. And that's not a one session thing.
That's not a one session thing.
And so
I think they can get a lot out of one session and really start to make massive changes. But yeah, they do need the ongoing support.
Yeah. So
most of the time,
so my package is 3 sessions. So then,
that's what I do too.
Yeah, if they're struggling to really trust and let go and surrender in that first session, it builds. So I've had people who've like stayed in the analytic mind and struggled and fought with it the whole first session. And then the second session, they have like a complete breakthrough over some like major trauma in their life that they've never identified. And they're like, their life has turned around. And if I just went by that first session, I would have, never known. So I just
exactly. And also, if you went by that first session and your ego was involved, you would have assumed that you are not a good hypnotist. You've got to get the ego out. You've got to just out of there. You can pick it up after the session.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things, and I'm sure that you see this in QJH too, is that oftentimes the experiences are so intense, they're so vivid, right? Not necessarily experientially vivid.
Right, yeah.
That there is a lot to integrate. They're like, I'm thinking of a client who spent the whole session with the Archangel Michael. And
energetically speaking, that can throw a person pretty off kilter.
Yes, exactly.
That's a lot of energy.
Exactly.
Whether or not it's verifiably true, all that matters is they have an internal experience.
The healing narrative. The healing narrative, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So it doesn't matter to me whether it was really the archangel or fractal of the archangel or whatever. It doesn't matter. It was profound.
Yeah.
And
it was profound for the client. And
the client was profoundly shifted.
Can you imagine if that client had had that experience in a session where the hypnotist was like, well, I don't believe in that, so you better stop it. I don't believe in archangels. Cut it out. Get out of there. Like then they would have missed out on having this whole beautiful, internally profound experience.
Yeah. Swimming in this healing pool. And it was just absolutely gorgeous. It was just mind blowing, but, I think it was those early sessions where I had clients really experiencing lives on other planets that were completely different than this, where I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to show up, but I'm going to be the space to hold it
open.
Whatever it is, I'm going to be the space to hold what it is that they are learning, experiencing.
I always think like nothing is going to completely flabbergast me anymore, right? But everyone, like, that's never true. Like every session, there's still something that I'm just like, wait, what? I don't say that out loud, but I'm just like mind blown again. So like when I have people that go to a future life, not the future of this life, a future life, a life in another dimension of Earth, maybe, where they are them, but they have a whole family that's not the family that they have here, and they know this family very, very well. And then they start to map out what the town looks like that they're living in, and like things like that. And I'm just, or the parallel lives, like sometimes when that happens, where somebody's consciousness, like they're connected to another person who's currently alive in a different part of the planet, and they can see through that person's eyes and share their consciousness. And I'm just like, again, what?
Yes, right.
It's not up to me to believe or disbelieve. It's just up to me to hold a safe space for people to have their experiences.
I don't know where we're going today, but
I know.
I'm driving the bus.
As I've heard trainers say, like, just pretend like it's the most fascinating person in the world and you have, you know, so much curiosity. Pretend. I'm like, I don't have to pretend, man. These sessions are mind-blowing and beautiful. And every client is fascinating. So there's no pretending, you know, it's everything. Anyway, Lynn says she's taken all this in. She'll be processing, looking at the book suggestions. They sound informative. Thank you. And she has to go. And it is 2:59.
Oh, it is.
So,
it is.
Yeah. I was going to ask the one set question that I like to ask at the end is like your most mind-blowing experience, but you've kind of already shared a bunch with us.
Yeah.
Is there anything last minute that you want to?
Yeah, just the last minute is now having clients, young clients that go back to a life during my lifetime.
Oh, wow.
That is fascinating. So I've had them go back to the 70s, to the 60s, right? To the 80s, right?
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, that one is really fun. And wasn't something, it makes perfect sense, but I hadn't really thought of it until we ended up in 1970s Chicago. And then I'm like, wait, what?
Wait a minute. I was alive then. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, so thank you so much, Pattie Belle. This has been wonderful. This has been enlightening. You gave us a lot of great suggestions, tips and tricks and tools. And for those of you listening, anybody here who is, I know we don't traditionally do this sort of exploring the intersectionality of science and hypnosis and spirituality in this particular group, but that is what I'm all about. That's what Pattie's all about, right? So if you guys want to learn more about that, please feel free to reach out to me directly about either Quantum Journeys Hypnosis Academy, which is internationally accredited and certified now. But also in just 3 days, I've got a Light Warrior training thing coming up, which is all about quantum physics, multidimensional consciousness, how to not only protect yourself, but how to get out there and make changes in the world, bringing the frequency of all of humanity up because we need it right now. So this isn't one of those like, I'm going to teach you how to have the very best life that you can have. And that's it. It's going to be how you can have the very best life that you can have so that you can then support everybody raising their frequency. So if that's something that interests you, just reach out to me directly and I will get you all hooked up. All right.
All beings,
I think that's everything.
All beings.
Yes.
And I just want to give
much.
a quick plug for QJH. I love the way that you have woven the science into it, and it makes it very digestible. I really love it. So
thank you.
If anybody wants to check that out.
All those people that were teasing me about using the word quantum in it, they can bite me.